Hey folks, the Kingdom of Hyrule has been around for a very long time. Hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands of years of rich history, lore, and untold tales we haven't heard. This kingdom is the primary setting of Zelda games, and we've seen it appear several times and in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, and conditions. Sometimes it's bustly and full of life, others it's flooded deep below a great sea, and lately it's been post-apocalyptic and in a phase of recovery. However, there are many parts of Hyrule's history that we haven't seen. Gaps in the timeline where there isn't a game to tell those tales, or points in time which are only mentioned, but never seen. In the latest installment, Tears of the Kingdom, we're formally introduced to the Zonai, and their ancient, but yet magnificent work. Unfortunately, we don't get to see what their life was like in its prime, despite Princess Zelda going back in time to when Hyrule was ruled by a Zonai king. This was still a bit ahead of prime Zonai Life, as it was only King Rauru and his sister Mineru left for the Zonai. We don't know why the rest of them died out or disappeared. That's for another day. However, we do see a lot of locations from their time, and in today's video, we're going to investigate the most intriguing and mysterious ones. This is the unseen life of Ancient Hyrule. Alright folks, be sure to go and grab yourself a snack or drink and send them in to get featured right here, and let's take a trip back in time to Hyrule's past. To clarify first and foremost, some of these locations might not have been in use or been as active as they used to be in the exact time frame Princess Zelda experienced. However, they are all at least that far back, if not further back, to the prime of the Zonai. With that said, the first location I'd like to investigate is the Ancient Throne Room, and as an extension to that, the Ancient Castle before the iconic Hyrule Castle we know was built. The Throne Room is the setting of Memory 7, a show of fealty. Ganondorf is seen to accept King Rauru's invitation and swears fealty to the first King of Hyrule. However, this parallels Ganondorf's intentions in Ocarina of Time, as this was all false allegiance, part of his plan to take over. The room itself is one long hall. It takes on the very nice Zonai architecture style, suited with many Hylian guards in their Zonai gear, Zonai patterns on the banners, and even some very beautiful glass art on the head window. Speaking of windows, if we take a look outside of this side window, we can actually see the top of the Temple of Time when it was grounded, meaning this throne room isn't far from here. In a different memory focused on Princess Zelda, we can see a building not too far from the Temple of Time. I believe this is where the throne room is, thus making the building we see itself the original Zonai Castle, or whatever you want to call it. Old Hyrule Castle, I guess. Or at least something of that importance. A cool detail to note is that it does look similar to this geoglyph depicting a castle-like building, so it all adds up. And the memory attached to this glyph is Princess Zelda standing just outside where the Shrine of Resurrection would eventually be built, which is right over towards this building. And the fact that Queen Sonia herself says, "Why not come back with us to the castle?" This is all something I didn't pick up when first playing through the game, and it wasn't until I started rewatching memories and breaking them down for this video that I put this together. It seems as though the heart of the kingdom back in the day of the Zonai was the Great Plateau, which makes even more sense as the spiritual king of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild tells us that the Great Plateau is the birthplace of Hyrule. So there you have it. The throne room in this memory, whilst incredibly cool in itself, has a lot more to it when you start looking around. We'll be returning to this area shortly, but for now, let's move on to our next location. The Duelling Peaks as we know it are two mountain peaks which meet towards the top. Old legends that were first told in Breath of the Wild say that a very long time ago, a dragon split what was once just one mountain into two, giving the Dueling Peaks its fitting name. Now, prior to Tears of the Kingdom, this was harder to believe or prove. However, not only does Tears of the Kingdom contain tons of dragon lore, but it actually gives us a look and proof that the Dueling Peaks was once a single mountain. Firstly, we can see on the ancient map of Hyrule found in the Forgotten Temple that the singular peak here is exactly where the Dueling Peak lies today, confirming that it was split at some point. We even go on to see it in one of Zelda's memories, as she looks over Hyrule as she's never seen it before. The camera pans around and ends with not the Dueling Peaks, but just the peak in the background. It kind of blends in if you're not thinking about it, as it obviously doesn't have its distinctive split down the middle. It's not the most mind-blowing thing about ancient life in Hyrule, but it's cool to think about when the Zonai were at their peak, and even at this point in time, the mountain was nothing like how we know it. Geographical changes to the world over time are pretty neat, I must admit. A very notable operation that took place in the prime of Zonai Life was the Construct Factory operation. A grand factory found in the depths that once produced the highly advanced constructs. In Tears of the Kingdom, we visit the still-standing factory as a part of Mineru's questline. It's a quiet shell of what it once would have been, only inhabited now by a lonely construct at the top, and through this construct we can learn a little more about how this site operated. It will tell us that the depots are where the parts would come from, and this main structure was the assembly area. Even more interesting, it mentions that the finished product would then be shipped to Dragon Head Island. The massive chain island that forms the shape of a dragon was a part of this operation, and I find that really cool to know. I imagine back in the day, this place was very busy and active. It's honestly quite sad that this lonely construct stays waiting up here, as whilst it recognises the operation has stopped, it's basically waiting here in case it ever starts up again. I'm sorry, buddy. Somewhere I didn't think I'd be talking about when I first started writing this video was the Gerudo Desert. When I knew I wanted to make a video about ancient Hyrule and its life, the barren desert didn't really scream to me. However, it's for that reason I want to bring it up. In Tears of the Kingdom, whilst it took on changes due to the upheaval, they are mostly geographical, such as this large rip into the land or the sinkholes opening up, but there isn't much Zonai work here, and that makes sense given the relationship status we saw between Hyrule and the Gerudo in the ancient past Zelda was sent to. We've seen this sort of disconnect and tension before in Ocarina of Time. That game also tells us of a time where the Gerudo Desert was sort of cut off from the Kingdom of Hyrule. In ancient times, the desert was likely barren, and not too different to how it is now. However, what's interesting is that there is one large sky island above the desert now. It hosts a menacing battle against the fearsome King Gleeok. But as for why it's here, I'm stumped. The Zonai clearly did make some stuff in this area at some point, as there is of course ancient Zonai shrines here, but whilst it likely was just as barren and harsh as it is now, the idea of exploring the desert in ancient times really intrigues me, and I promise that has nothing to do with the absolute baddie Gerudo warriors. Absolutely nothing. Going back to an indoor location, another place in ancient Hyrule that intrigues me is Mineru's study. We see it in two different memories of Princess Zelda's. Firstly, right after that previous memory we looked at, and once again towards the end of Zelda's time in the past. We can safely assume that this room is somewhere within the castle we previously discussed. Firstly, because Zelda headed straight there from the previous memory, but more so visually speaking. It shares the exact same architecture inside. The room itself is filled with books. I can only begin to imagine the sorts of knowledge and wisdom these contain, and who wrote them. Books about Zonai history, culture, and famous figures from their prime. Probably books about Zonai technology and how it all works thanks to Zonai mine deep below. And probably a fanfiction or two. We also see the usage of fans on the wall. I'm no genius, but my Zelda theory brain is telling me that this is air conditioning. The Zonai had air conditioning. If that doesn't scream highly advanced civilization, then I don't know what does. We also see some Zonai equipment, such as this ladder used to reach books. It's the same design-wise as ladders seen in the shrines. Despite the Zonai as a people having nearly died out at this point in time, their work and culture is still very prominent in life. Mineru seems to be the one keeping a hold of a lot of history in this study. She even has her own construct assistant, which is pretty cool. As far as this building, which we can assume is the castle, goes, we can safely assume it is where both the throne room and Mineru's study are found. There very well might be more rooms of significance, but for now, let's move on to somewhere else. Before moving on to the final location of the video, I want to give a mention to the random sky islands dotted around the map. Some of them would have served small but still worthwhile purposes back in the day. Something we see all over the sky map is mining facilities, or equipment. Some are extremely small, others a bit bigger. Many of these do feature one or two small buildings as well. Now, given they are just dotted around and not really in much concentration, we can assume that back in the day the land featured many small mining villages or stations, probably home to just anybody who worked or operated there. Some of these small buildings might not have even been proper homes, more just facilities. For all we know, it was constructs that used them, but it's still cool to know. Another random sky island, or rather islands that I'd like to mention, are the 3 dive ceremony islands. These sites were a big part of Zonai culture back in the day. You can learn this by speaking to one of the constructs beside the large structures. They explained that the dive ceremony is a trial for Zonai youths to show their courage and enter into adulthood. This is really interesting to me, as it's one of the very few pieces of information detailing the life of a Zonai youth, and it's just more culture in general about the Zonai. Now for the final place on the list, and before getting into it, can I quickly ask that if you're enjoying the video thus far, then consider subscribing to the channel for more fabulous and cozy Zelda content. With that said, the most exciting part of Ancient Hyrule's life, in my opinion, would have been the life itself. Towns, villages, and settlements that we never saw, the architecture, the regions they were all set in. It's all incredibly fascinating, yet mysterious. There isn't really one specific place in mind, but rather just checking out some of the more settlement-like ruins. Starting off on the Great Sky Island, we find many building ruins, all mostly small buildings, but definitely enough room for a bed or two and some storage. The Temple of Time which is found here was on the Great Plateau back when it was on the surface long ago. We can assume all of these ruins were nearby, if not near one-for-one surrounding. Regardless, this was potentially the largest settlement area of peak Zonai times. We know Hyrule Castle wasn't built until after Ganondorf was sealed by King Rauru, and in that time frame, the Zonai were down to just 2 individuals, meaning Castletown as we've known it over the years wasn't built yet. Whether it's in the sky or on the ground, with the knowledge of the throne room and such being on the Great Plateau already, it's a relatively safe guess to make that these buildings made up the Zonai equivalent of Castletown, and was their largest settlement back in the day. It has the rough layout of a town, different areas for different purposes, nature-dense parts, and of course still being compact enough to create a community. We see some areas that are more dense with multiple buildings in a variety of shapes. These were likely people living next to each other. We don't really see this in the memories, however, at least on the Great Plateau with the angles we got, and Rauru tells us nothing really when we're going around the Great Sky Island. Another location which likely had a settlement of sorts is Dragonhead Island. This stunning location was once a part of the Construct Factory operation, and if you explore the large island chain in full, you'll find a good few building ruins. It's more speculative than others, I must admit, but like the smaller mining villages I mentioned earlier, perhaps some people did live here whilst on the job. And that wraps things up more or less. The ancient life of Hyrule is very likely to remain a big mystery. I am by no means an expert, just a fan who loves the games. We can investigate, speculate, and theorize, which is what I enjoy doing. But will we ever truly know what it was like back when the Zonai were in their prime? I really do wish we could have explored or even just seen more of what life was like back in this era. We might never know, as the next mainline Zelda game is very likely to be moving on from the Wilds era, but at the same time, not knowing every detail is a part of what makes it all interesting, so I'm not too bothered. What is your favourite location of ancient Hyrule that you'd like to explore or learn more about? Let me know in the comments, and if there's some I missed, maybe I'll make another video on this. Big thanks to my channel supporters as always for the kind support in helping make my videos all the more possible. Join today and gain instant access to behind the scenes content, as well as a shout out upon joining and your name on screen right now. My socials and Discord server are linked below, and that's about it for today's video. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day or night, and until the next time, I've been Hyrule Gamer.